What was your screw it, done helping others moment? I had a friend years ago who was a bit self-centered and prone to stretching the truth, but he was a nice enough guy with a rough backstory, and my friend group liked him, so I cut him a lot of slack. I like to host, and I have friends staying over pretty regularly. Back then, I usually had one or two people spending the night on any given day. Anyhow, over the span of a couple of years, this guy starts misusing that, staying over for days or even weeks at a time, eating my food and drinking my liquor without contributing, that sort of thing, while constantly talking about his grand plans and daydreams as if they'd already happened. A little sad, but also pretty annoying after a while. Anyhow, I sat him down one day and let him know he's gotta head home, and that he's free to come over and hang out, but I'm not comfortable with him staying over for the time being. He leaves. I think it went remarkably well, and heads out to work. And it turns out that I broke in while I was away at work and stole a bunch of my sister's things because his birthday was coming up and neither of us even thought to get him a gift. It takes a special person to rationalize how burglarizing someone is really their fault. Anyway, all slack and sympathy went out the window immediately. Called the cops and he's doomed to me. From nice enough guy to textbook definition of a freeloader, that's quite the character arc. Story 2. A guy I used to be friends with couldn't afford to pay his bills. It was the middle of winter. His heat was shut off in his house, so I told him he could crash at my place until I figured it out. 3 days in and I'm coming home to my sink stacked with dishes. Garbage everywhere, all my food gone. I told him he can't stay if he's not going to contribute or help out around the house. A couple days later, I told him he had to go. Dude runs off to the West Coast to essentially pass away and comes back as a very mentally unhinged user. I still talk to him online now and again, but I can't be his friend anymore. Story 3. When a good friend of mine that I worked under had cancer and wasn't able to pay some bills, I loaned her $200 just to help. I was only 18 at the time and felt bad because she had kids. It was right around the holidays and I just wanted to help however I could and be a good person in life. She promised to pay me back when she could. Turns out she lied about having cancer, was stealing from the company I worked at, scammed my other coworkers, and would come in after calling out of work for her chemo to make fraudulent returns while I was overseeing the store by myself because of her calling out. Got that witch fired and got promoted to her position after. Story 4. My mother and her new husband had moved into a new place and invited all their kids over for Christmas. In previous years, we would buy a whole turkey dinner from somewhere, so no one, me, had to cook. So imagine my surprise when my husband and I walked in. My mother walks out of the kitchen, hands me a spoon and says, "Good, you're finally here," and goes to sit down in the living room. After a quick and awkward conversation, it was determined that my job was to make sure everything currently in progress, or not even started, got to the table on time, while everyone else socialized. Basically, I was the help and should have realized that, so any feelings I had about that were my fault. I was a good cook, and my mother taught me everything. Not. So I owed her. So I did, and not knowing the family dynamics, my new step-siblings were very thankful and appreciative of all my efforts, which caused a meltdown from my mother about how we all should be thanking her. That was the first time I used a phrase that has come in handy for these situations. "I'm so sorry. It will never happen again." And it never did. They weren't happy when they finally realized what that meant. Story 5. I've also experienced something sort of like this. Anytime my ex had his family over for holidays, I'm talking 5 or 6 people, all from the other side of the country. Ironically, he never seemed to know ahead of time that they were all coming over until like the day before or whatever. Every single time. So I would prepare the house, because he always had to work until the very minute they needed to be picked up from the airport. Then it was expected that I would cook dinner. Now, this is my fault really, because I did it the first time, giving him the idea that I would do it every time. So I ended up always doing it because he didn't have time or I'm better at it. So family would show up, I'd be cooking and cleaning, everyone else would be playing games and socializing, and hours later my ex would be falling asleep on the floor intoxicated. I finally said no the last time he told me everyone was coming over. I said no, I'm sick of being taken advantage of. His response, "I did it for you. I thought it would make you happy. Didn't you have fun all the other times?" To which I replied, "I thought you didn't know until today. When did you decide this would make me happy?" "Well, I got a hotel room and stayed the heck away until they all left. Came home to an empty, trashed house." Story 6. One day I found a puppy, dirty, hungry, and just scared and lost. I gave him a good meal and some love and went to drop him off at the address on his collar. The dude thanked me, then proceeded to hurt the dog, telling me to mind my own business when I tried to get him to stop. Carried him in a muddy patch with a crappy broken 3-wall doghouse where I'm guessing the dog spent 100% of its time. I called the cops, but they did nothing. The dog technically had shelter, which qualifies because 3 walls and a roof, even if it was filled with holes and it gets 20 degrees at night here. P.S. I stole the dog 3 weeks later. Story 7. We have helped out my sister-in-law a few times with money and bills. Never a lot. $50 here, $100 there. Usually for some bill to avoid services being cut off. I'm usually the more heartfelt one in my marriage, but I ended up being the one to put my foot down. Went over to her apartment once. She had 2 big flat-screen TVs, a new couch, new fridge, kids on PlayStation or whatever console she got them. It was all rent-a-center stuff. But that was the end for me. I didn't have any of those things myself, not to mention the incredibly bad financial decision those things were with a high interest rate. Part of me felt like I was taking food out of our kids' mouth, but realized that no, her poor decisions were doing that. Story 8. I used to frequently stay late at work for clients who showed up to the veterinary clinic last minute with a non-emergency problem and no appointment. Then, 3 times in a row, 3 different people were told up front about the after-hours fee, agreed to pay it instead of scheduling an appointment for the next day, and all of them called back the next day fussing that they shouldn't have been charged extra for keeping us 30 to 60 minutes past our scheduled hours. That we were terrible and trying to scam them by charging for our time. Even though we told them up front and they had another option, it was exhausting and demoralizing. We did more than we had to for them after already working a full day because a desire to help is why we're all here in the first place. They responded by saying our time was worth nothing and we suck. The entire staff said, screw that. Now, unless it's a literal life and doom situation, if we can't fit someone in before closing and they didn't have an appointment, it's a firm no. I'm in this profession to help others and I still work late for real emergencies when they happen or if an appointment runs longer than expected. But I'm done sacrificing my personal time for entitled people who don't actually need it. Story 9. When I dropped my rates significantly to help a struggling family with childcare. Blended family needing to find childcare for their emotionally damaged children who had been hospitalized by mom's boyfriend. Both parents worked and my wages were paid through a charity scheme. It was hell. They were utterly useless as people, let alone parents. They took the whiz and ended up basically doing nothing with the house or children and ended up owing me nearly $2,000 due to them committing benefit fraud and pocketing what they should have been passing on to me. The final straw was when they asked me to babysit that night as they needed to go out on the lash. It's been stressful. Whilst telling me they couldn't afford food, let alone pay me. Never again will I fall for a sob story. Story 10. This is more specific to the teeny-weeny town I used to live in. I used to believe I was valued by the community. Used to actually believe in that community spirit, that soul, if you will. I had seen it and participated in it. When I left my marriage of almost 13 years, there had been about 10 years of domestic violence. I well and truly thought the community would help me out if I needed it and reached out, as I had seen so many other times in the 15 years I'd lived there. Nope, got quite the opposite. Nobody believed me. People who I thought were friends disappeared. People who I thought were friends played the, it wasn't really that bad, was it, card. People that I thought I could trust to help keep me safe by not telling anyone where I was living went straight to my oppressor with that info. Hardly anyone would even speak to me, even just to say hi when I needed acknowledgement most. Screw all of those schmucks. The community spirit. Turns out it only applies to bake sales and rescuing cats from trees, not, actual human suffering. Story 11. Worked in Baton Rouge for a decade, 1999 to 2009, and would regularly give the homeless I saw around town, generously, if I can say that without being a schmuck. In 2008, I was on a run for work, and a guy caught me near the Target on Segan Lane. He had nothing. He was homeless, and on top of it, had been robbed an hour ago. No worries, empty my wallet for the man. We all need help. Coming out of the shopping complex, I see him hiding in the bushes, opening a pack of smokes and a laptop on his iPhone. Then a month later, I saw a man I regularly donated to on Government Street. I would catch him on weekends, but this weekend my drop-off started early, so I saw him as he arrived in downtown BR. I sat behind the TV station waiting for a pickup, and this guy gets out of a new car, changes into dirty clothes and grabs his sign from the trunk and heads off to his corner. I've given food and connected people with charities, but I have not given a penny to a beggar since then. Story 12. I was 17 and still in school. The corridors were empty as my teacher sent me out to go do her a job. So I was just walking down the corridor when this girl carrying a bunch of books bumped into me and she dropped the books, like you see in a movie. So I apologized because I wasn't really paying attention and I bend down and get the books for her and hand them to her expecting at least a small thanks. But no, instead this chick had to say, I have a boyfriend, so never ever purposely bump into me just so I can talk to you. You should have walked away. She begins to turn away. I grab her shoulder, which makes her turn around and I knock the books out of her hand and say, now that was on purpose. And I walk away while she's standing there speechless. Some of you may think that was messed up, but I don't really regret a single bit of it as she got what she deserved. Story 13. Last two times I've helped push someone out of mud or snow in the winter, they've slammed the gas pedal down, coated me in mud, and as soon as they were free of the mud, just kept driving without so much as a thank you. I've stopped helping people stuck in the mud or snow. Story 14. I had a new manager come into my former place of employment. Immediately, this new manager starts firing people for BS reasons and hiring people from her old job to replace them. The walls in that place talked, and few noticed the janitor. So when I heard rumors of the next heads in the chopping block, one of which was mine, I decided to be nice and help out the other two. I considered them good friends, and it was the least I could do, right? I warned one, and he takes it seriously and begins looking for another job, so when the pink slip arrived, it landed in his feet running. The other probably goes squealing to the manager in question, who uses that as an excuse to fire me, and then fires the person that had squealed. All three jobs were quickly filled by her old friends from her previous job. I refused to lift a finger to help a coworker out since I've had advanced warnings of firing and disciplinary hearings and various other juicy gossip. People, for some reason, think I hear with my eyes and assume that they can talk in front of me and I won't notice. I'm going blind, people, not deaf. I've kept it all to myself. Screw him. Story 15. Met a guy who had hit a rough patch. We had great chemistry and he made me laugh. The bar was so low. He gave me a sob story of why he was getting kicked out of his communal house, and I offered to let him stay with me because I live alone and I have my own place. Huge mistake. He hadn't hit a rough patch. He was the rough patch. Barely paid for anything and would get wasted while I was at work and be a total schmuck when I got home. Got fired from his job, ate all the food I'd bought and made excuses as to why he hadn't found another job yet. The absolute kicker was when I went home from my Nana's funeral. He treated it like a mini vacation in my place. Invited friends over, played music so loud the cops got called, and when he was supposed to pick me up from the airport, it was wasted at someone's house at 8 a.m. Never felt better than the day it kicked him out. No more financial and emotional cruelty. Finally, it felt like my place was mine again. I've learned an expensive lesson. Don't help people that won't help themselves. When nothing is their fault, there's a serious issue. Run fast and far. Story 16. In freshman year of college, my friend of about 2 years got kicked out of his parents' house. He said he needed somewhere to stay for the night, till his parents cooled off. I said, you can stay a week if you want, but more than that and you'll need to pay me rent. He made pretty good money, more than me even. I was kind of hoping to find someone to split the bills with anyway. A week rolls by, and he hasn't even looked for another place. His parents aren't letting him come back. I ask him if he's going to stay. He says, if it's all right with you. I say, sure, just pay me half the cost of the apartment every month. He said he can't. I know damn well he can. I say, well, then you gotta go. He asked if he could stay another week. I said, no. He got angry at me for that. I then got angry at him for getting angry at me. I gave you a place to stay and you're mad at me? Totally ended the friendship. Never let anyone into your place unless you have a signed contract. Story 17. I was working at a fast food place when I was a student. I usually did overtime to help everyone clean up and close the restaurant until about 1 a.m. because we were so understaffed. I guess people got used to me staying late because one night when I was supposed to finish at 11, I overheard some of my colleagues, the stereotypical mean girls, say how bad the clients had cluttered everything tonight and how it was going to be a mess to clean up. Then they say, but hey, me is going to stay late tonight again. Let's leave it to her. She always does the cleaning anyways. Followed by laughing and some witching about me. That night, I clocked out at 11 after doing all of my tasks at the counter and left. The girls stared at me in shock, and when I was outside, I saw one of them standing in the middle of the restaurant with her hand on her forehead, looking at the mess she would have to clean before going home. Weirdly, after that day, they started cleaning earlier without waiting for me to do everything. Story 18. I'm a nice person. I look after people. Colleague is sick. I go out and buy cough medicine or paracetamol for them. Got no food. I'll get you a takeaway. I've never expected anything in return, but one day I was asked for money. I did. Not a lot. It was like 20 pounds. They eventually gave it back. Then they asked again, and again. Never wanted food or a train ticket, just money. And the last time I lent the money, he walked straight into a betting shop and put money in a football game. That was it. He asked me for more money sometime later, and I said no. Guy literally throws a tantrum. I'd always help you out. I give it back. I thought we were mates. I don't fund gambling habits, and haven't given him or anyone else help again. Just looking after me now. Story 19. I was pretty down on my luck. Quit my job and started touring in a band. Just getting started, so money wasn't great. One night, a 50-ish-year-old dude stops me at the entrance to the grocery store. I had enough for a cheap six-pack, toilet paper, and cat food. He gives me a story about how he's stranded overnight and just needed some food before he could get back on the road. But I go in and figure out how to get the guy some dinner. Some chicken fingers, macaroni salad, and some dinner rolls. Get my beer, get cat food and TP. Take the guy's food. Go to my van and start digging for change. If I can't get beer, I'll at least get a candy bar. Go back in and the schmuck is buying a 12 of Keystone. I raised hell at him. Just screamed the guy out the door, making sure everyone knew why. Screw you, man. Story 20. I often donate to causes I feel strongly about and still do to this day. Now, typically it may not be a ton of money. $20 a month is an example, but my rule is if they contact you for more money, you're likely going to have to discontinue. One group called me and basically belittled the amount of money I was giving, saying they really need people who are contributing $100 a month or more, or large one-time donations. I immediately told them to stop any further payments from AutoPay and to stop contacting me. It makes me reconsider charitable giving altogether. Story 21. Mine was in college. I was the only one in the group with a car, so everyone hit me up for rides. I get a bit annoying since I was the only one also with a job, so sometimes I get asked if I could give them a ride to the airport or bus. One time, a friend called me up at like 12 p.m. or so and asked if I could give her a ride to the bus terminal at like 1 a.m. I was like, sure. So on the way, she told me that she was going to stay the weekend, but got annoyed with her sister, so she was leaving for her hometown. She'd asked her sister for a ride to the bus terminal, even though her sister had been drinking at home. Her sister was intoxicated, and she still took her. They made it halfway when she got pulled over and arrested for DUI. Well, my friend called a buddy to help her drive the car home, and then she hit me up for a ride to the bus station. She told me all of this on the way there, and all I could think of was, so you asked your intoxicated sister for a ride when she was already home? She got arrested, and now you're leaving her here without even lifting a finger to take her out. Long story short, I bailed out the sister. I told myself after that no one would have done that for me. They would have left me there, so I stopped giving people rides, and slowly but surely, my number of friends decreased drastically. Did she at least offer to pay for gas, or was the emotional trauma of her sister's DUI payment enough? Story 22. I posted a futon in the marketplace, and the first person that hit me up gave me a sob story about needing something for the kid to sleep on. I was only asking for $20 for it, but they asked if they could get it for free. My wife and I agreed to give it away, so I took it to our meeting spot at Home Depot. 2 days later, this guy had the futon posted in the marketplace asking $50. My wife and I Facebook stalked him and his wife, and every time they posted it, we would hijack the listing, letting everyone know the story of how they got the futon. I don't give crap away anymore, no matter the story they give me. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 23. My youngest sister used to steal my stuff all the time growing up. Once in high school, I thought I lost my iPod. Turns out she had been hiding it around the house for 6 months. She would steal my money, clothes, laptop, and toiletries. Later, she would steal my things and sell them for substance money. She once tied her elderly family dog to a post overnight in near-freezing weather because she wanted to get high but couldn't be bothered to walk 4 blocks back home to drop off her dog. Less than 3 months later, I had to put our dog down because of health issues from that night. The last straw was my first break. First year of university. I bought a pair of sweatpants, branded with my school's logo in my suitcase, but couldn't find them the morning after my arrival. Later that day, I got in the car and that little witch was wearing my freaking sweatpants and tried telling my parents we happened to have the same pair. My university is pretty small and over 2,000 miles from my parents' home, so everyone immediately knew she was lying. I know it's a small thing to be the last straw, but after that day, she was gone to me. I would be cordial the few times I saw her after that, but I never tried to contact her and have made it clear that I don't love her anymore, because I know she doesn't give 2 craps about anyone else in her family. We haven't spoken in 3 years, and I could not be more grateful for it. Story 24. I once had to make an HTML website for a school project in high school. Since I sucked with computers, and our teacher didn't actually teach us anything, I asked a friend who was good with computers to make the webpage for me. My friend did an awesome job, so I thought I'd be a sport and help the rest of the class who were as clueless as I was and share my project with them so they can copy the structure and just change the topic and pictures or whatever. Only to find out a week later that one guy submitted the exact thing I shared without changing anything, and say it was the one that copied him. I was called into a very serious meeting about stealing his project. I told the teachers to ask the rest of the class about who the webpage really belongs to, and they backed me up, but I never helped anyone else all throughout high school. Story 25. I have a sister. She must be a klepto or something because she stole my clothes that were 2 sizes too small for her. I had this pink dress that was my absolute favorite, and one day it went missing. I confronted her about it, and she was dismissive, like, why would I do that? Fast forward months later, she's packing up her room to finally move out of my mom's house, and lo and behold, my pink dress was in her pile of clothes. She'd also do stupid crap like break things or ruin things around the house and tell my mom I did it. She would also get spiked and abandon her baby at her house while she was God knows where. She knew my work schedule, so even when she moved out of the house, She would wait in the driveway for me to come home from work so she could pawn her baby off on me while she did whatever the heck she wanted. I just stopped going home after work. I was 18. She was in her 30s. Ridiculous. Some people, man. Story 26. I was walking home on the way back from the bank the day before Thanksgiving. I passed a homeless man with a sign saying something along the lines of, "Hungry, anything helps." I walked over to him and asked if he was hungry. He said yes, and I offered to take him to the subway up the road. He declined, instead asking for money. I told him I don't carry cash anymore, but I would gladly buy him a footlong meal. He scoffed and ignored me. Okay. I continued along my route home and encountered another homeless person with a sign along the same lines. I asked her if she wanted food. She declined, once again asking for money instead. I told her as well that I don't carry cash, but I would be happy to take her inside the Burger King she was posted outside of and buy her whatever she wanted. This woman actually had the audacity to ask me to go to an ATM and withdraw money to give to her. I politely told her that I wasn't going to do that, and she became visibly upset, to which I just walked away. I'm not going to stop helping when and where I can, but it really puts a damper on my optimism. Story 27. I was an intern at a radio station in '01. Helped one of the morning show DJs with a bar night at the Mall of America one Saturday night. She was notoriously hated by everyone at the station, but seemed appreciative of my help and we got along that night. As we were cleaning up after close, 1 a.m. or so, she asked me if I would walk her back to her car for safety. I declined as I had parked in the opposite parking ramp and had to carry all the equipment in one trip. She pushed and pressured and confided that she was nervous walking back to her car this late, and after she offered to drive me and the equipment back to the van, I agreed. We walked out to her car and continued talking like friends, but as she got to her front door, her entire demeanor changed. I actually don't know you that well, and I don't feel safe driving someone I don't know in my car. And she got in her car and left without a thank you or goodbye. MOA had closed, so I had to carry the equipment down the ramp, around the mall, and back up the other ramp to the station's van. Didn't do crowd for her at any other events again, though she was fired a few months after my internship ended. Story 28. I used to be the organizer of my friendship group. It was often like herding cats. One day we went to a convention, for which I had made all the arrangements and distributed all the info. We split to go to 2 different panels, me on my own to one and everyone else to another. We arranged a time and a place to meet afterwards. When the panel ended, I went to the meeting spot and waited, and waited, and waited. Over 45 minutes. No one responded to calls or texts. Finally, one of the group rocked up, a full hour after we'd agreed. Turns out that they decided to stay on and watch the next panel, and it hadn't even occurred to them to let me know. To say I verbally ripped them up one side and down the other was an understatement. I was furious. Never arranged another outing again. Now, when I go somewhere, I tell the ones I'm still friends with, show up or don't. Story 29. Roommate's friend from college came crying with a "I have nowhere to go or just need to get on my feet" sob story. I was very hesitant to let him stay in her house, but my roommate insisted it would be fine. The guy was the laziest, whiniest, useless freaking bum I've ever met. Constantly complained about the way we did things. In the house he was living rent-free in, did nothing but smoke, drink, and watch YouTube on his phone all day and never contributed so much as a dime to the house. And it's pretty obvious the guy's life consisted of freeloading until he got kicked out and then started the sob story all over again. Roommate and I gave him the boot and he had an epic temper tantrum and threatened us. So I called the cops and told him I was filing a restraining order and he better get the heck out of here. He left in his crappy beater truck and we never saw him again. Anytime I've heard I just need somewhere to get on my feet, I'm extremely hesitant, and this loser did nothing to dissuade that. Story 30. I volunteered one summer at the local Boys and Girls Club. They were always understaffed and my girlfriend worked late, so I would help out a few hours each night. I would get asked all the time which kid was mine. I don't have kids. To which the reaction was always suspicion why a man without kids was helping out if I wasn't a creep. And at the end of each day, they would ask if I had court-mandated community service papers they needed to sign off before I left. Takes altruism out of volunteering. Story 31. This homeless guy in LA was asking me for money to buy food, so I took him down to a Subway and paid for his meal. It was like his first time there, so I had trouble ordering. He added some other stuff like 3 bags of chips, which was annoying, but I paid for them anyway. No thank you or anything. He took his food and quickly left. Found him later trying to sell the food for beer at a supermarket down the street. This wasn't a single occurrence. There were many situations like this. Worst was a woman standing outside a supermarket asking for money for her starving baby. I offered to buy baby food for her inside the market and she declined. On closer inspection, it was a fake baby and this Hispanic dude she was with was sitting in his car nearby watching these interactions. Screw LA and the homeless population there. Story 32. There was a guy in Brooklyn. Maybe he still does this, but I don't live there anymore. Who would try to hustle people by claiming he'd locked his keys and wallet in his truck. along with his daughter's diaper bag, which had her special formula. Could you help him out to buy some? First time I ran into him, it happened to be less than a block from a pharmacy. I told him sure, I'd go in and get it. What kind? He said they didn't have the right kind at that particular store. I told him I'd walk with him up the avenue. There was another pharmacy less than 10 blocks away. He walked for like 3 blocks as I tried to make small talk, before he said, "Nah, man, I feel bad making you walk all the way there. You don't have to come. Could you just give me the money?" I made up a lie that I was a country boy who just moved to the city. I don't carry cash in case I get robbed in the mean city streets. He apparently gave up when he couldn't think of another lie to keep this going, so in about another block, he said, "Oh, I just remembered. That other pharmacy doesn't have the kind she needs either." I offered to walk to a different pharmacy, but he declined, thanked me, and walked off. About a year later, he walked up to me in the same neighborhood, and I immediately recognized him. He started into his spiel, and I said, "All right, she's still on formula? Special kind, right? Locked in your truck again? You know, if you're going to try to hit the same neighborhood more than once, you really should get better at remembering faces." He looked scared and just walked away quickly. Story 33. I'm a giver by nature and had a good friend during my college days. He was not able to get an internship even after sitting for 10 to 15 companies. Whenever he was rejected, I offered him kind advice and fed him. This is hostile I'm talking about. I don't have that much spare money to begin with, but I always made sure he felt positive. I gave him a treat when I got an internship, but the day he finally succeeded, I playfully asked him, "Where's the party, dude?" He said, and I quote, "Where the heck will I give you a party?" And took some other friends of his out for drinks. I'd sound like a cheap shot to the story, but I was hurt. I had no spare cash left, but I made sure he was well fed and motivated. I said the same exact line. Screw this crap. I don't deserve it. Story 34. Okay, this is going to be a venting session for me. When I was in high school, I had this friend. We'll call her Sunny. Sunny was being relentlessly pursued by this boy who we'll call Michael. If I went into detail about all the terrible and manipulative things Michael did to Sunny, would be here for days, but my frustration came in when I tried to help Sunny. I couldn't stand to see her getting treated this terribly, so I sacrificed study hall after study hall to help her and comfort her. So did her other friends. And then she admitted she had an intense crush on him, despite how much of a schmuck he was. And I really mean it when I say he was a cold-hearted, manipulative schmuck. But we didn't give up. We kept telling her to stay away from him, but she just wouldn't listen. Got to a point where one day she would be on his lap on a couch, but literally the very next day she'd hate him with a passion. All we ever talked about during lunch was Michael. Eventually I realized she didn't care about my help. All those study halls, lunches, and tender talks meant nothing to her because she didn't value anything I was saying. I decided to completely ditch her, and whenever another friend starts talking about relationships, I give a disclaimer and set boundaries for how much I'm willing to help. Lesson learned, if people don't value your help, don't give it. And make sure to set boundaries in your help so you know when to stop. Story 35. I was walking to a concert in downtown Chicago in late November. This happened in North Dearborn, right in the Loop. If you've never been to Chicago, it's one of the nicer parts of downtown. It was a cold night, so I was walking with both hands in my pockets and a cig in my mouth. I was approached by a younger dude who didn't appear to be homeless immediately as he was dressed semi-decently and didn't reek or anything. He asked me if he could bum a cig. I was in a good mood, going to the concert, so I said, sure, and gave him one, along with my lighter. He handed me my lighter back and I expected he would keep walking on, but he matched pace with me and asked how I was doing. I told him fine and asked how he was doing. He said he's just trying to make it out here. I thought, here we go. He asked me for money because he said he hadn't eaten all day. Now I had about $200 in cash on me, mostly in my 20s. I had maybe a couple of smaller bills, so it's not like I couldn't give him money. But I didn't want to pull out a wad of any size in front of a guy I don't know on the street and people can judge me or whatever, but I'm not in the habit of giving money to homeless people. But I always try to treat them with respect and dignity. I politely told him, sorry man, I don't have any cash. He got kind of angry at that point and launched into a guilt-trippy tirade for the next half block or so about how nobody has any compassion anymore and sometimes people just need a little help. I didn't say anything in response. Truth be told, I started to feel kind of bad for him. What he said is pretty true. A lot of people aren't willing to help other people, and sometimes people really just start down on their luck. I was second-guessing my decision to turn him down until we reached the next intersection. I was going straight, and he cut to the right. I had to stop for the crosswalk, and I watched him get not 5 steps away from me before he took the cigarette I gave him, that he'd barely sucked on because he was too busy yelling at me, out of his mouth and threw it on the ground. He then proceeded to walk right up to another dude and start talking to him. Maybe I didn't help him much, per se, but if he was as down in his luck as he wanted me to believe, he would have been burning the filter on that thing before giving it up. I instantly felt vindicated. Story 36. I will always help people no matter what, but I remember this one time I saw this guy broken down in his car on the side of a busy road. Turns out I knew him. I pull up and he says that his tire's flat and doesn't know what to do. I said I'll help. In his mind, that was a cue to just stand on one side and watch me whilst he talked on his phone with his wife. Didn't lift a finger, not even to get the tire out of the boot. After we were done, he just said a perfunctory thank you and went. Weeks later, I saw the same guy at the supermarket, and upon seeing me, he came over. I thought it was to thank me. Nope, the wanted some donations for a charity he had gotten involved in. Screw off, I said to him, in my mind. Story 37. I work at a grocery store. I get a lot of problematic customers, but I can think of one in particular that made me decide, screw you, I'm not helping. We had just installed self-checkout in the middle of the pandemic. Smart move. Our store is not tiny, but very compact. We set up a line for when people are ready to check out. We have a person on that line directing customers to SEO, self-checkout, or to whichever register is ready. And that day, one of my supervisors was doing the line and I was attending SEO. One dude comes over with his chin diaper and is having trouble. He's a regular, a rude one. He calls me over to help with some produce. I tell him to pull his mask up. He looks at me oddly. I think maybe he couldn't hear me, so I speak up louder. Then yells at me to stop bothering him. So I comply. I don't help him. I later found out from that supervisor that the rude customer had called him a weirdo for asking to put his mask on properly. So the supervisor sent him to SEO to deal with an employee who was best at handling rude customers. Me. Supervisor knew I wouldn't take his crap, and I didn't. Dan, if you're reading this, that was one of the most rewarding interactions with a schmuck I've ever had at that store. Story 38. I spent most of the first lockdown in the UK trying to help a friend get out of a toxic relationship. Toward the end of it, she just wasn't listening. She was in that point saying, oh, he loves me and he's kind. Then she started saying that me and my friends were trying to manipulate her. This angered me and snapped something inside me. I'm not an angry person. Anger me and I'll tell you how things are, and I'm not afraid to tell someone what I think. So I unloaded everything I had to say. I also found out yesterday that he cheated on her, which made me laugh a little. I think we're friends again, since she told me herself and apologized. Story 39. Both happened one right after the other. First, I have a friend in the UK who has another friend whose relative was seriously ill. The sick person had always wanted to visit New York, but due to her treatments, wouldn't be likely to do so. He asked if I could go around the city and pick up souvenirs, take some pictures, etc., and send them to him, so he could pass it along to her to lift her spirits. Well, I did. I went around in the evenings for the next 2 weeks and bought souvenirs, got a playbill from a Broadway show, got subway maps, took pictures and printed them, the whole nine, and then mailed it to the UK from New York, all out of my own pocket. It was over $100 altogether. Never got reimbursed by either of them, despite repeated assurances that the money would come. Second, I got asked by an acquaintance of a friend about advice for photography and art shows and how to approach submissions, etc. I've been in the arts for many years, so I wrote him a nice introductory email with some good initial resources, tips on submitting and shipping artwork, etc. Never even a thank you email back. When I wrote to ask if he received my first email, he wrote back with a quick, oh yeah, thanks. Then asked me to do a review and critique of his new photos. Yeah, nah. So yeah, unless you're family or very close friends of mine, I'm not going out of my way anymore. Story 40. My wife and I, for our first Christmas together, adopted a family in need of Christmas gifts. We were so excited to shop for the kids and deliver. We got to the house the week before Christmas and met the mother at her door. She unenthusiastically told us to set the gifts next to her tree, which had already been loaded with other gifts, and we left with barely a thank you. I can't confirm, but I'm pretty sure this family made it a habit to sign up with multiple family adoption organizations just to collect as many gifts as they can. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.